get started here. And Miss Sheila's here this morning. How are you doing? Good. All right. And I saw. Where is he? kind of like Gene Sneed. I sent him text. And I put, "Where's Waldo?" No telling where he is. Now, Jim or Lee, looked like you had a little project going on out there on the highway with your son the other day. Had traffic blocked while you was unloading that, and then. What were you guys doing, putting up some interior stuff in there? Because the roof was on, had the roofing on it, but you were. All right. Okay. Well, that's a good deal. All right. It's good to see everybody. It's definitely fall. We can, I think we can truly say that now. It's still a couple of weeks till the trees will be turning, though, I think. You can see that there's, they're a little more yellow, or not quite as green as it was, but we're still a couple of weeks away, and it will be pretty. Now, I heard, was it last week, that Branson, when we had that first cold spell that dropped in here, Branson had snowfall, that they had a dusting of snow up there. So it's already, and I know have a friend that's up in Iowa right now and so on. They said that it's already been cold there, and gotten some weather as well. So winter is just around the corner, but it is good to see everyone here this morning. Gail Willis, I checked with Martin. He does a good job keeping up. And Gail has been moved to a nursing rehabilitation facility. And so they've got to do some rehab with her because of her inability to walk and do some things right now. Richard is still struggling. He's tough, and he's just trying to put those headaches and things aside, and just so we want to continue to pray for them for sure. Dana Clifton's mother passed away this morning, so we want to remember Dana. I know that she's been they placed her mother on hospice. They had called the children, told them the time was close, and I think that was on Wednesday or Thursday. Also, Christy Nunley's brother passed away. His funeral was on Friday, and we want to remember all of these in our prayers. Are there others that I'm missing right now? I know my cousin Lisa Van Landingham. She down at Fort Gibson. Her husband is associate minister there, Barrett, and she's having surgery tomorrow. She's having both breasts removed, and so I ask that you keep Lisa in your prayers as well. It's good to see Marty and Kelly here. Their family, and it's good to see them. Yes, Martin? No, you just... Jerry Kane is still, he and Lola, I guess, are still on vacation. They were down in Texas and so on. We want to pray for them. Gene Sneed, I think Gene and Karen are supposed to be back this week, or they are back. They're supposed to be back today. Okay, I knew that it was sometime soon right here. I refer to Gene as Waldo because I always want to send him a text. It's like, "Where's Waldo today?" So he's been all over the place, and they've, I think, had a good time. So, but we have missed them, and so we're looking forward to them. Any others that we need to mention before we... Let's go to our Father in prayer. Lord, as we come before you at this time, we're so thankful for this avenue of prayer that we have to come to you before your throne, dear God, and that the Spirit, Holy Spirit, works through us to make known to you our mumblings. And Lord, as I mumble to you this morning, I pray that you hear these things, and that, dear God, I know you will, and that you answer those prayers. And dear God, give us the ability to see these things. We know that we have some sisters in the church who have lost loved ones, Dana Clifton's mother and Christy Nunley's brother. And Lord, we just pray that as family that we can surround them and bear this pain with them, to lift them up, dear God, and to pray for them and help them through these difficult times. We're so mindful of Gail, Willis, and Richard, and Lord, we just pray a special blessing for them, that you be with both of them, that they can recover. And Lord, give them some quality years in their life, that they may enjoy this earth that you had created. Lord, then we know that there are others that we need to discuss and talk about. And Lord, I pray for my cousin Lisa as she goes into surgery tomorrow, that this will be successful and eliminate this issue of the cancer, dear God, and just pray for that family. Pray for my Uncle Harold as well as he recovers from his broken hip. And Lord, just pray for that family, because it seems like there's so much that is just piled on all of a sudden. So be with them. Lord, as we prepare to worship you this morning, just ask that our hearts and our minds will be opened and focused to you, and that we, dear God, will look to you, and that your Spirit will guide us into a better understanding of your word. Lord, there's just so many things that we're thankful for, and we love you, and as we prepare to worship, that our worship is acceptable in your sight and worthy of the glory of and majesty of your throne. We ask these things now in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen. All right. We got over in chapter 38 of Genesis, so if you'll open there, we'll just do a quick rehash, and I do mean quick when we get here, because there's so many things in this that we want to look at. All right? So in Genesis chapter 38, as it starts, let me get should have got that out of my pocket before. We're looking at this, and it kind of varies, because, and I think that this is a kind of an unusual chapter because of what we just talked about. Now, what's just happened in chapter 37? What did the brothers do to Joseph? Oh, they sold him off. They caught little brother, and they sold him off, younger brother like that, the favorite. And so they've sold him. And so that story just kind of put a block on there. And it's like, nope, that story. But yet then we go to chapter 39 and we pick up that story again, which is and this chapter is put in here. And when you read about kind of what happens right here, you know, you could really ask the question, why was this put in here? Because of what goes on here. Now, we talked about that Judah leaves his brothers. Now, let's think about family tradition right here for just a second. Were the children supposed to take wives from the Canaanite women? No. Taboo. Not supposed to happen. Judah, then it says that Judah leaves his brothers. His brothers are in the field. You know, where is Jacob? He's still up around Hebron, I guess, and his brothers are tending the flock, and then that's how they sold Joseph, because they were away from where Dad was. And so Judah has been with them, but this says that Judah leaves his brothers. And apparently, when we read this is for some period of time. Because when he leaves, he's got this buddy, this Adulamite. And so he leaves his brothers, and he goes, and I guess he's hanging out with, what's the guy's name? Hira? Who's the Adulamite? Yeah, Hira. He goes, and whose name is Adulamite. So he hangs out with him. Now, he's got to be there for a period of time, because then he sees Shua's daughter. And I think it's interesting, too, that we have this story about her and all that, but we never know her name. She is Shua's daughter. That's all we know. And so Judah takes her as his wife. And we know that she had 3 sons, who married Tamar. Was such an evil person. Going back to the history of this family, if you will, How was he raised? Well, who knows what Judah. I mean, apparently it wasn't good, though. Because why? He was so evil, God took his life. Now, like I say, we kind of have to go back before the flood and think about what the situation was like then in order to understand how disgusting that this individual was in God's sight. That God said, no, and takes his life. Brings us then to son number 2. And Onan is supposed to, by the way, the tradition is that the next brother then will take that wife since he didn't have any children, and he is supposed to produce children so that they can be his brother's children. Now, there's an interesting statement right here because it says, but Onan knew that it wouldn't be his offspring. So what's that mean? His son would be his nephew as well, or something? I don't.
Well, he's the son of the firstborn, and now he might lose his next step in.
There you go. This goes back to inheritance as well, and we'll point that out a little bit later. There's a trick ending to all this. So when Onan is looking at this, he's thinking, okay, if I father children, since those are the children of the firstborn son, who gets the inheritance? So it said that he left his seed on the ground, and God, that was displeasing to God. And what did God do to him? Took his life as well. I don't think it was just because of that one act. I think that there was and that was just, if you will, when I worked in that rehab facility I worked there for 3 years, and people would come in and say, yeah, this is what I did that caused the injury. And it's like, no, that was just the last act that you got to perform because you've been hurting it for the last 30 years, and this was the last act. And that's kind of the way I look at Onan. He wasn't that great either because, and then when he pulled this act in this regard, God said no. And so then that leaves him with, and I think then that it's interesting that we come back and Shelah, and it tells where he's born. Now, when you look this up, it kind of gets interesting as well, because you look this place up, Shezeb, and there's 2 different ones. One of them is over on the coast, and that's not the one that they're talking about here. This is the one that's located more, how was it? Kind of in the hill country of what later becomes the inheritance of Judah. But it's, in the hill country and extends over to the coast of Gaza. And that name just keeps popping up throughout history right there, because it's kind of interesting as well. So, and he was born, and it tells us that he was born there. So this idea, and I think this part of the story kind of goes back to, because as we said, later, over 400 years later then, when the tribes are being distributed and they're giving their land and so on, this area becomes Judah. This is part of his inheritance. So it's kind of it's like it's not uncommon in that regard. And if they kept up with history the way that we think that they did, then this will explain a little bit of that as well. All right. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law, because he's only got 3 sons, 2 of them are dead. Both of them were supposed to, one of them had relations, one of the other was supposed to have with this one woman, Tamar. And what is Judah looking at Tamar like? Something wrong with that chick. I'm telling you right now, she's bad news, right? Because he actually, in some regard, blames her, because what does he do? Now, 3rd son is supposed to give 1st son, children again. He's supposed to give Tamar to Shelah as a wife, but what does Judah do? doesn't fulfill that. No. Brother and sister, we're not talking about for a year or two. We're talking about for a considerable period of time where Shua's daughter dies of old age or something right here because she passes away, which was the mother of Onan, who was Tamar's original, or who was Tamar's original husband. So the mother of, so this has to be some considerable time later after that. All right? Now then, here's where the story kind of gets squirrely. And I don't understand the customs of everything, but Judah tells Tamar, instead of staying in his house, he sends Tamar back to her parents to live with her father. Now there's something else, and I did a little bit of, grabbing and scratching on this and trying to look, and I went through four different groups or, studies on that. And then I went to one Jewish rabbi, and I thought that his take on some of this was very interesting because it's totally different from the other four. Anybody else who does it, the Jewish rabbi looks at it differently. But Tamar had been in Judah's house. We don't know what period of time. She goes back to her father's house. Now, here's the Jewish rabbi. He said that, because we know that what's getting ready to happen, Tamar, because Jewish women, was veiled all the time that she was in Judah's house, and he didn't know what she looked like. When she plays the part of a prostitute, he says the rabbi's version is that her face was exposed, but Judah didn't recognize her. If you can see the eyes and you can hear the voice, I'm promising you he would have recognized her. So I'm not buying the rabbi. Everybody else says that the women at that time, faces were unveiled. Now then, you're living in Canaan. Anthony, what did the Canaanites have that God hated?
About this much sin.
Because of what? All the different idols and gods. This god of fertility and different things. So the temple prostitutes, and during harvest and so on, they would go out and be seen in places. They would even, as two of the authors that I was reading were discussing, that they would even go to the threshing floors where they were taking the grain to thresh the grain, and that they would perform sex acts on the floor of the grain where they were harvesting, threshing floors. I'll get it out in a minute. In order that, to bless the crop, that it would be a bumper crop, big crop. So this was a common practice. Now, what doesn't make sense in this regard is that this particular town didn't have a temple prostitute. Now, when you read the other four guys from the Jewish one, these guys said that different women in the town, which, once again, you're talking about ungodly people, but different women in the town would perform this, and they would cover then their face, veil their face, so that they wouldn't be recognized. They would wrap so that their clothing looked different, I'm assuming, in that regard, and so that they wouldn't be recognized then after they had served their time for what, and then go back to their way of life. I thought, that's really, and then I'm thinking, is that so much different than a lot of what goes on today? I mean, really? So anyway, Judah's plan is to go up to Timnah, where his sheep are, and he's going to shear his sheep. His wife has just died. He has fulfilled the time of mourning. And I don't know, I didn't look that one up. I don't know exactly how long that is, but I thought it was somewhere between 7 to 10 days, something like that, in that regard, that I don't know. So, hasn't been long, and he goes up to his sheep. Now then, we would talk about an individual that had a date within 2 weeks after his wife died. I'm thinking. Just thinking out loud right here. But when he leaves the time of mourning and heads up to Timnah, he stops at, and now Tamar has to be in the same town, right? Because she catches wind of what his plans are. Well, how did she get those? Now, she was probably, since that was her mother-in-law, she was probably part of that group of mourners that was involved in that ceremony, right? I mean, we would think that in that regard. So she knew what Judah's plans were to go up. She also knows a little bit more about Judah than we're given credit for right here. Because what does she do? She goes up there and sits outside this town of Enom, and it's kind of strange because this place is mentioned, but they can't find it. It's mentioned over in Joshua and some other places that this town, but as far as city-wise and historically speaking, they can't find where it is. They're not sure. You kind of guess at where it is because of where he was and where he was going, but the historians, so it was kind of strange on that. So he's going that way. So what Tamar does, she takes off her, and I don't know what this garment was, but she takes off her widow clothing. She wraps herself, as we talked about, and veils her face. And she goes to the place, and it said that there was possibly a fork in the road or something here where Enom was in this regard, and that she had placed herself there. Well, when Judah comes along, he propositions her, thinking that she is what? Now, he's been in Canaan for a number of years. Has he picked up on their traditions and their, quote, religious activities of these other gods for? And the answer is yeah. So what does he take Tamar for? Temple prostitute. So he solicits, let's just say it like it is, he solicits sex right there along the road. Tamar says, okay, but you're paying for it. All right? So what are you willing to pay? Well, I'll send you a goat. All right, that's all right, but what are you going to give me as a down payment so that I can keep this so that till the goat gets here, I've got something in hand? Tamar had this thought out pretty well. A woman will think like that.
Well, it gives you her motivation, because she was promised his son, and he hadn't been given to her.
Exactly.
So that's she's, in her eyes, I can see where she might think that, hey, I'm just getting what I was promised all along. And that he hasn't come up with it.
Yeah. And yet, you wonder, it's like, well, this is not his son, this is his dad you're talking about right here,
Well,
Great. Oh,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, Sheila was grudged. Sheila was the one that she was supposed to get as a
Yes, he was the youngest.
Right, but she hadn't gotten it yet.
Right.
So she's gonna get it another.
Father-in-law.
She's gonna get in the family.
Yeah.
You could ask, what's her draw? Now, if you say she just wants to have a kid, that's one thing, and that could be a pretty strong draw. But the economics of that day, with that social security and other things that could fall into place for her without family, and barren, she's destitute.
So we go back to the idea then that she's looking out for what's going to happen if because I can't, I don't know why she couldn't remarry. And now that was one that I questioned a little bit too. Why couldn't she remarry? And so, but she's looking at, as Craig said, the idea that when my family dies, who's going to take care of me if I don't have any say-so in Judah's family? So there's all kinds of, and we have absolutely, if anybody, we would need ladies to talk about this, because I can tell you right now, guys don't have a clue what's going on inside a woman's mind. Marty, you know I'm right. So, yeah, you do. But we really, in that regard, all the things that Tamar, and of course, we don't know all the things that she has seen over the years as well, through all this. So, he says, she said, I'll take your signet ring, your seal. Okay, now, what is that signet ring? What is that about?
Business.
Business. They put some kind of paraffin down there, and you put your signet ring in there, that's your seal, we got a deal or whatever. So that's Judah's seal. So she gets that ring, she takes cord from his robe, which I guess it was on the ground by then, and then the staff that he was using as he's going for the sheep. So he gives those things and said, she says, I'll keep these till you send the goat, then we'll trade and go on. The act is performed. Tamar conceives. So when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, Here now, let me come in to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me, that you may come in to me? He said, Therefore I will send you a young goat from the flock. She said, Moreover, will you give me a pledge until you send it? He said, What pledge shall I give you? She said, Your seal, and your cord, and your staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her, and went in to her, and she conceived him. Then she arose, departed, removed her veil, and put on her widow's garments again. So when Judah then, and I think this is interesting, I guess Judah doesn't want to be seen, so he doesn't go back to take the goat and free it. Instead, what are good friends for? Yeah, that's the job I want. I'm supposed to go find this, and make your payment for it, huh? Okay. And I'm assuming now we have to go back culturally. Was this that big a deal? In the culture in which they lived, was this really that big a deal?
Of course, you see the same thing in big business and politics today.
Yeah. I mean, what's different, huh? So that's the way it was. So when Hira gets back there, he doesn't find this lady out. So he asks the men of the city. Now this is where the story kind of takes a strange twist too. And don't you know, Hira's scratching his head. They said, we've never had a temple prostitute here. I guess because none of the women in the town were willing to go be So what does Hira do? I tried. I even talked to the men of the city, which if the men would know if there was one around, right? So he goes back and says, I don't know where she is. So what did Judah say? He said, well, at least I gave her that stuff so that I'm not a laughing stock that, I didn't pay for services rendered. I mean, brothers, this is a weird story to be in the Bible. And you look at this and you're thinking, Tamar, Goodness. Goodness. Okay. So he returned to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Furthermore, the men of the place said, there has been no temple prostitute here. Then Judah said, let her keep them then. Otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I sent this young goat, didn't find her. Now then, about 3 months later, the story begins to thicken. Plot begins to thicken again, because what do we find out about Tamar? What does Tamar discover? She's pregnant. When Judah finds out that she's pregnant, what does he say? Tamar, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, has played the harlot, and behold, she is also with child by harlotry. Now, is that a true statement? And the answer is yes. Because did she play that role? And the answer to that is yes. And Judah solicited this act. Then Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Now wait just a second. I got a couple of things. Who was the one that was asking for, but he doesn't know that who? Doesn't know that this is Tamar, right? Where does this idea of burning her come from? Went back and dug into that a little bit. And at that time in the Mideastern countries of where they're living and so on, this was a common practice to do to women who had disgraced the family. If they were caught in an adulterous act, or if they disgraced the family in some way, they were literally burned alive. This was a common practice. So that's where Judah comes up, because I was like, where did he grab this? What is this thing? But when you go back and read a little bit, that was common practice. So, and yet, the temple prostitute's all right. That's just the way it reads. That's the way it goes right there.
Larry, could that show how much they had accepted the morality of other religions?
I think so. In fact, because of where we are right here, in this Canaanite, they had all these different gods, and that was one of the things that they did. But sexual acts at the temple where they were accepted as, if you will, forms of worship in this regard. And so Judah had fallen into this because, what's the old saying, something about certain types of companions corrupt good morals? And so I know that maybe Judah originally wasn't taught that way, and so do we understand now then why God was against taking wives from the Canaanite? And we look at it and it's like, well, yeah. And so it was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law, saying, I am with child by the man with whom these things belong. And she said, please examine these and see whose signet ring and cord and staff this is. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her to my son Shelah, and she did not have relation, and he did not have relations with her again. Now then, think about this. Whose house did she live in? She had to live in Judah's house, because since he had gone into her and had child by her, then not only what would have been his grandsons were also his sons. Now think about that for a minute. So she lived, in this regard, he would have taken her as a wife, but he never had relation with her again. But she has twin boys. And the rest of the story is how these twin boys, and it's kind of, once again, there were twins in her womb, and it took place that while she was giving birth, to one put his hand out, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on that hand, thinking this is going to be the firstborn, but he withdrew the hand. And when the babies were born, the other son was born first, and the one that had the red thread on his arm was born second. And so what a breach you have made for yourself. So she named Perez, the one that came out first, and afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. End of story? No. Turn over to Matthew chapter 1. Matthew chapter 1. We'll just start in verse 1. The record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Judah. What is Jesus' bloodline? From this brother, Judah. Think about that for a moment. Lloyd, if I was playing God, I wouldn't have picked Judah, I don't think, as the guy, Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. The first woman listed in the genealogy of Jesus Christ is Tamar. Interesting story. From this, how did God view Tamar? When we look at things sometimes, and boy, I'm going to tell you, I've spent a lot of time reading and rereading and going back through here and so on, but this story has really had an impact on me because of God looks at things differently than I do. But I can understand one thing, regardless of how pitiful that I think that I am before God, which I am. I'm not. You can't imagine. But God can still lift me up. There is not a soul on this earth, because God created each of you. He knows exactly what we're all capable of. He created me. I sometimes wonder, I've had other people wonder that. But God can forgive. And when we look at this, and this action of Tamar, we're going to kill her, but then what winds up happening here, she is mentioned in the bloodline of Jesus. When they brought the woman that was caught in adultery to Jesus, what did he say to her? Rahab the harlot. She's mentioned in here too, because what did Rahab do? She put her whole family at stake in order to save those spies, and she's mentioned here as well as part of the bloodline of Jesus. Great.
A lot of other world religions would find criticism of Christianity and the bloodline and all that because of the flawed characters that God used, and yet we count on that.
Yes.
We might be the next flawed characters.
Exactly. Where the others, like Craig said, where the other religions and so on look at that and say, how good, not. We count on that. That's what we depend on, because we know that God can and is willing to save us and get us up out of that. Next week, we go right back to Joseph. Like I say, this one chapter, this story is thrown in here, and it's like, man, you got to, if you just read through it, or, it's told to you by someone, you don't really study, it's hard to understand and appreciate everything that goes on in this one chapter. It's a lifetime right there.
Larry, too, I think it shows we're not going to mess up God's plan.
Yeah.
Very true, Kelly. We're not going to mess up God's plan. God has a plan. He's going to work his plan in spite of me, not because of me. Too many times. So, yeah, God has a plan. He's working his plan. And ain't nothing we can do to mess it up. And that is what we count on in God, is that He has that forgiveness and saving grace, that we can be forgiven. Thank you all. Appreciate you very much. And I hope you have a great week. Enjoy this cool weather. I'm glad we got some rain too. And yes, I sat in the stadium